Late at night, the city felt unusually quiet. Streetlights cast long yellow reflections across the slightly wet pavement, and most shops were already closed. The air was cool, and distant traffic hummed softly somewhere far away. A lone man walked calmly down the sidewalk, hands relaxed, posture steady, footsteps unhurried. He wore simple clothes, a plain black jacket, dark jeans, and boots, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth or fame, no bodyguards, no security car, no sign of fear. From across the street, 3 thugs noticed him. Easy target, they thought. They stepped out of the shadows and moved quickly, blocking his path. 1 stood in front of him. 2 circled behind. Wallet? One of them said coldly. Phone. Now. The man stopped walking. For a moment the street went silent. Then slowly he raised his head. Under the streetlight, his face became clear. It was Keanu Reeves. But something felt wrong. He didn't panic. He didn't argue. He didn't even step back. His eyes were calm, focused, observing. The kind of calm that doesn't come from confidence. The kind that comes from experience. And suddenly, the 3 thugs realized they might have picked the wrong man. The thugs laughed. Not nervous laughter, not unsure laughter. The kind of loud, careless laughter that comes from thinking you already won. One of them stepped forward and shoved him hard in the chest. Not enough to knock him down, just enough to show control. Just enough to humiliate. The man barely moved. He simply adjusted his footing, steady as if he had expected it. That only made them laugh more. To them, he looked like every other quiet, wealthy celebrity who wandered into the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. Someone protected by fame. Someone used to assistance cameras and security guards solving problems for him. Someone soft. Someone easy. They didn't see danger. They saw opportunity. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know he trained almost every day, not for show, not for movies, but for discipline. For focus, for control over his own body and mind. They didn't know he studied combat styles with patience most people never develop, learning movement, timing, distance, balance. They didn't know he understood something most fighters never learn. Real fights aren't about anger. They're about survival. And survival belongs to the calm. The streetlight above flickered slightly. The wet road reflected yellow light across their faces. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, tires hissing softly on damp asphalt. The man looked at each of them carefully. Not aggressively, not fearfully, just carefully, like he was measuring space, measuring movement, measuring decisions. 1 thug stepped closer, invading his space, trying to force fear into his eyes. Nothing changed. The man spoke. His voice was low, steady, almost gentle. "You don't want to do this." For a split second, silence sat between them. Then the thugs burst into even louder laughter. One of them mocked him in a fake calm voice. Another clapped slowly, sarcastically. The third shook his head like he couldn't believe how easy this was going to be. To them, those words sounded like begging, like weakness, like the last attempt of someone hoping kindness might save them. They had no idea it was a warning. The man's breathing stayed slow, controlled. His shoulders loose, hands relaxed at his sides, not raised, not clenched. Ready, watching, waiting. The biggest thug stepped forward again, this time closer than before, close enough to smell alcohol on his breath, close enough to see the tiny shift in the man's eyes. Not fear, focus, predator-level focus. But arrogance is loud, and arrogance is blind. The thug smirked and pushed him again, harder this time. Around them the city stayed quiet, windows dark. Streets mostly empty, no one rushing to help, no one stepping in. Just 4 men under streetlights. 3 thinking they were in control, and 1 who knew exactly how this was about to end. The laughter slowly faded into something sharper, meaner, more dangerous. The night air felt heavier now, and even though they didn't understand why, something about this man still didn't feel like a victim. The biggest thug stepped forward with a smirk still hanging on his face. Then he swung. It was a wild punch. Fast, but sloppy, powered by ego, not skill. In that single second, everything changed. The man moved. Not fast in a flashy way, not dramatic, not wild, just precise. His head tilted slightly, the punch missing by inches. At the same time, his hand moved, controlled, direct, efficient. A sharp strike to the attacker's wrist. Another quick motion to the elbow. A crack of balance. The thug gasped as his arm went numb, his body folding forward before he even understood what happened. The man stepped aside smoothly. The first thug hit the ground hard. For a moment, the other 2 just stared, confused. Because real violence doesn't look like movies. No shouting, no big wind-up punches, no wasted movement, only efficiency. Under the streetlight stood Keanu Reeves, breathing steady, eyes calm, posture relaxed, like nothing had happened. Then the second thug rushed forward, angry now, embarrassed, desperate to take control back. He grabbed for Keanu's jacket. Bad decision. Keanu stepped inside the movement, redirecting the grip instead of fighting it. His hand locked onto the thug's wrist. His shoulder turned. His weight shifted. Simple physics. The thug's own momentum flipped him forward. He slammed onto the wet pavement with a painful thud, air exploding from his lungs. He tried to get up, but his arm was pinned in a controlled hold. Not broken, not crushed, controlled. Enough to end the fight, not enough to destroy him. Keanu released him the second he stopped resisting. No anger, no punishment, just resolution. The third thug froze. Everything inside him screamed danger now. This wasn't Lamok. This wasn't fear. This was training. Years of it. The third thug took a step back, then another. Then he turned and ran, shoes splashing lightly across the damp street as panic finally replaced arrogance. Keanu watched him go for exactly 1 second. Then he moved. Not chasing wildly, not sprinting with rage, just controlled speed. 3 long strides closed the distance. His hand caught the thug's shoulder, a quick pivot. A controlled leg block. The thug hit the ground hard, but not deadly. Just enough to stop him. Keanu stepped back immediately, creating distance, giving space, showing he wasn't trying to keep fighting. The thug stayed down, breathing fast, terrified now, done. Silence returned to the street. Only the hum of distant traffic. Only the faint buzz of street lights. Only the sound of 3 men realizing how badly they misjudged their target. Keanu stood still for a moment, scanning them, not with hate, not with pride, just awareness. Making sure the danger was over. His breathing stayed slow, controlled, like this was just another training drill. Another moment of focus. No shaking hands, no adrenaline panic, no celebration, just calm. He adjusted his jacket slightly. 1 thug groaned on the ground. Another rolled onto his side, coughing. The third stared up at him, fear replacing every ounce of earlier confidence. Keanu looked at them quietly. Not like enemies, like consequences. Finally, he spoke. Not loud, not threatening, just clear. You should rethink where this path ends. No lecture, no speech, no insult. Just truth. He stepped back fully now, giving them space to move if they wanted to leave. Giving them the choice to end it. Because real control isn't about dominating people. It's about ending violence as fast and as clean as possible. The street returned to stillness, and for the first time that night, the 3 thugs understood something terrifying. They hadn't attacked a helpless man. They had attacked someone who knew exactly how much force was needed, and exactly how much was not. The street returned to an uneasy quiet. A few people had been walking nearby, and now crouched behind cars or near storefronts, phones raised shakily. Their cameras caught what they couldn't believe, the calm, precise way one man had dismantled 3 attackers without raising his voice or even breaking a sweat. No one expected this. Not chaos, not flailing punches, not dramatic, over-the-top violence, just clean, efficient self-defense. The footage would later go viral. But at that moment, there were only witnesses in shock. Keanu Reeves stood in the middle of the dimly lit sidewalk, adjusting the cuff of his black jacket. His breathing was steady, his eyes calm, his posture unshaken. One young man leaning against a nearby lamppost whispered into his phone, "Is he really?" His friend muttered under his breath, barely audible, "That was insane." A small group of people had stopped on the corner, their steps frozen mid-walk, eyes wide. They had all seen mugging attempts before, small scuffles, desperate grabs, angry words. But nothing like this. This wasn't a performance. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't a scene from a movie. It was real skill, real control, and it was terrifying. The thugs lay scattered on the wet sidewalk. One groaned, one coughed, and the third had finally dared to crawl to the curb. Wide-eyed, shaking, and silent, the witnesses exchanged glances. Some gasped. Some whispered to each other. Some just stared, gripping their phones so tightly it turned the edges white. Keanu's calmness dominated the street more than any shout or panic ever could. The tension was no longer theirs to control. It belonged entirely to him. A woman, leaning out of a nearby apartment window, shook her head softly, mumbling, "He doesn't look scared, he looks untouchable." A man walking his dog paused mid-step, jaw slack, muttering, That's Keanu Reeves." His dog barked nervously, sensing the sudden eerie stillness. Even the street itself seemed quieter now, as if it had taken a collective breath. The night air hung heavier, the glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wet asphalt, illuminating Keanu Reeves' calm figure against the chaotic aftermath. A few brave souls started murmuring to each other, questioning what they had just seen. Did he really just? The point wasn't how fast he moved or how hard he struck. The point was the control, the quiet authority that emanated from him. That made even 3 aggressive men think twice before rising to challenge him again. One elderly bystander, leaning on a cane, finally spoke aloud. "I've never seen anyone fight like that. Not in my life." Others nodded, slowly lowering their phones, though their hands shook slightly. They weren't filming for entertainment anymore, they were recording proof. Proof of something remarkable, terrifying, and undeniably real. Keanu didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He didn't even look satisfied. He simply stepped back further, creating space between himself and the thugs, his eyes scanning the street, watching, observing, ensuring the threat had truly ended. The few who dared speak up kept their voices low. They realized instinctively that this wasn't about applause or recognition. This was respect. Silent, profound, earned respect. And for the first time that night, the witnesses understood something important. True power doesn't announce itself with noise. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't need to. It exists quietly, efficiently, and without effort, just as Keanu Reeves had demonstrated. The night continued, but something had shifted. People moved differently now. Cars slowed. Conversation softened. Even the shadows felt smaller, less threatening. All because one man had walked calmly down a quiet street and reminded everyone that real strength is measured not by the fight itself, but by the control with which it's handled. Keanu adjusted his jacket again, looked around, and finally began walking forward, slow, deliberate, composed. The witnesses watched him go, breathing steady, eyes calm, presence unshakable, and the memory of that quiet power would linger far longer than any shout or punch ever could. The hum of the city night was suddenly broken by the distant wail of police sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder, cutting through the quiet streets like a sharp knife. People nearby froze, turning toward the sound. Their phones dropped from trembling hands as realization began to settle in. Someone whispered, barely audible over the sirens, Do you know who that is?" Another voice, trembling now, said louder, That's Keanu Reeves." The words spread instantly through the small crowd like wildfire. Eyes widened, mouths dropped. Phones were raised again, but this time no one was recording for entertainment. This was something else, proof, evidence of what they'd just witnessed. The 3 thugs lying on the wet asphalt stiffened. Their bravado had vanished entirely, replaced by panic, confusion, and a creeping sense of doom. The first thug, still coughing, finally lifted his head. His eyes met Keanu's, calm, steady, unshaken, and the weight of the truth hit him like a punch. They hadn't attacked a random, quiet man. They hadn't chosen a weak target. They had attacked a trained fighter. The second thug tried to scramble up, but his limbs trembled uncontrollably. The third, who had attempted to run, now sat frozen in place, fear rooting him to the wet pavement. Keanu didn't raise a finger. He didn't move to intimidate further. He simply watched. His presence alone carried the authority of someone who had been underestimated and proven utterly in control. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Some whispered about his movies, about his roles as an action hero, but it wasn't the cinematic skill they'd just seen. This was reality, raw, terrifying, efficient. Police cars appeared at the end of the street, lights flashing red and blue across brick walls and wet asphalt. Officers stepped out quickly, hands on their radios, scanning the scene. Keanu turned slightly toward them, nodding once, a simple acknowledgement that the threat had ended, that control was maintained. The thugs now fully understood fear had been their constant companion throughout this encounter. Every punch, every shove, every mocking laugh had been meaningless against a man who moved with absolute precision, who calculated each motion, who remained calm when chaos should have ruled. An elderly bystander, gripping her cane, whispered to no one in particular, "I've never seen someone so untouchable." A young man, phone still raised, whispered, "Hey, he didn't even need to fight hard. Just skill." Keanu adjusted the collar of his jacket as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. His calm, measured demeanor made the revelation even more powerful. It was one thing to witness strength, but another entirely to realize that the street's perceived hero or victim had been a master of control all along. The thugs' minds raced. They thought of earlier arrogance, of shoving, laughing, and taunting. They had assumed weakness. They had assumed compliance. Now their own mistakes screamed back at them louder than any siren. You can't, he's just a man," one muttered to himself. But the crowd and the street itself seemed to shake with an unspoken truth. This man was extraordinary. Keanu Reeves, calm, quiet, composed, had walked among them as a single, unshakable presence. The realization struck the thugs fully. They were lucky he had chosen control over vengeance. The witnesses now whispered excitedly, nervously, in awe. Phones clicked again, capturing wide shots of the scene. Keanu standing tall, 3 defeated men on the pavement, police approaching. A woman leaned from her window above the street and whispered. He didn't even have to raise his voice. That's power. That's real power. Keanu's eyes swept over the scene once more, lingering just long enough to make a point without saying a word. He didn't need to explain. The revelation had already settled in every mind present. They didn't attack a victim. They attacked a master of control. And in that moment, every single person watching understood the quiet truth: appearances can be deceiving. Calm can be more dangerous than chaos. The sirens grew louder, but the street itself seemed smaller now, contained within the memory of one man's quiet authority. Keanu turned and walked toward the approaching police, his figure calm, unhurried, yet undeniably commanding. The thugs remained where they were, utterly aware of their mistake, utterly aware of what had just transpired. And the witnesses for the rest of the night would not forget it. The street was quiet again. The distant wail of police sirens, now closer but still softened by the city's night air. Keanu Reeves stood in the middle of the dimly lit sidewalk. 3 defeated thugs sprawled across the wet pavement at his feet. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He didn't even look satisfied. For a moment, he simply observed them, calm, composed, completely unshaken. The defeated men looked up at him, eyes wide with disbelief and fear. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced with the raw, uncomfortable awareness of their own mistakes. Keanu spoke, his voice low and measured, cutting through the silence without raising an edge. Violence destroys lives, including yours. No finger-pointing, no scolding, no hint of triumph, just truth. It hung in the air like the faint echo of the distant sirens, impossible to ignore. The witnesses around the street whispered among themselves, some still gripping their phones, some lowering them in awe. No one dared interrupt. No one needed to. The lesson was already clear: strength doesn't need to shout. True authority is quiet, deliberate, and undeniable. Keanu adjusted his black jacket and began walking, not hurriedly, not dramatically, just slow, deliberate steps along the slick pavement, each one echoing softly in the quiet street. The thugs didn't move. They couldn't. They were rooted by their own fear and the clear demonstration of skill they had underestimated. The streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt, casting elongated shadows, but Keanu's presence seemed untouchable. His calmness dominated the space more than any shout, any fight, any display of aggression could. A young man in the crowd murmured to his friend, "Hey, he's untouchable." "That's not acting. That's real." Another bystander whispered, "You can't even call it fighting. It's control. Pure control." Keanu didn't glance at them. He didn't need affirmation. He didn't need applause. The lesson had already been delivered. Every motion, every pause, every measured action had spoken louder than words. The police cars arrived, lights flashing, engines humming, but they approached the scene cautiously, already sensing the atmosphere. Keanu stopped for a moment, allowing them to take in the scene, the defeated thugs, the silent witnesses, and himself, standing calm and composed as if nothing unusual had occurred. Then he turned again and walked past the arriving officers without hesitation. They nodded, recognizing authority in a way they did not need explained. The night seemed to exhale around him. The chaos of the attempted robbery, the fear of the attackers, the awe of the witnesses, all condensed into one quiet truth: real power doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. It is calm, measured, precise. The witnesses would remember this night for years. Not because of flashy moves or violence, but because of the way one man had stood, unshaken and composed, showing what it means to be truly in control. Even the thugs understood, if only briefly, the depth of their misjudgment. They had assumed weakness. They had assumed fear. And they had been shown that appearances can deceive. That calm can be stronger than rage. That skill, experience, and restraint can render even the boldest attack powerless. Keanu's steps echoed softly on the wet pavement as he moved down the street. The city had returned to its quiet rhythm, yet something intangible had shifted. The bystanders, the witnesses, the police, all carried a sense of the extraordinary into the otherwise ordinary night. He didn't look back. He didn't glance at the defeated men. He didn't smile. He simply walked quiet, composed, untouchable. And in that quiet, he left the lasting impression of true power, the kind that commands respect without demanding it. The kind that teaches lessons without forceful words. The kind that leaves the world a little wiser, a little more aware, and utterly aware that control, not violence, defines strength. And with every step, the knight remembered him. The street was empty now, the distant hum of city life returning to normal. The lights reflected off the wet pavement, casting long, quiet shadows. Keanu Reeves had disappeared down the sidewalk, leaving behind a scene frozen in both awe and reflection. In that stillness, the lesson became clear. Never judge strength by appearance. It is easy to assume that someone quiet, unassuming, or dressed plainly is harmless. It is natural to look for signs, the flashy clothes, the bodyguards, the loud voice, as proof of power or capability. But appearances are deceiving. They tell only the story we want to see, not the truth of what lies beneath. Calm people are often the most dangerous when forced to defend themselves. Because calm is not weakness. Calm is awareness. Calm is preparation. Calm is control. It is the result of hours, years, even decades of discipline. The kind of strength that doesn't need attention, applause, or recognition. The kind that acts when required, precisely, effectively, and without waste. True power is control. Control of body, control of mind, control of the situation, control of fear. Real power does not shout. It does not boast. It does not need the noise of aggression to prove its existence. Power is quiet. Power is deliberate. Power is measured. Noise is the refuge of those who lack it. Those who cannot rely on skill or awareness raise their voices, hoping the world will believe in their strength. But the world, the quiet world of real life, sees through it. Noise cannot replace knowledge, nor can anger replace experience. The thugs had learned this the hard way. They had assumed arrogance and recklessness were signs of weakness. They had misread calm for fear. And in those few moments on a dimly lit street, their assumptions had been destroyed. The witnesses had also learned. They had recorded the fight, yes, but what stayed with them was not the fall of the attackers or the quickness of the strikes. It was the stillness of the victor, the quiet authority, the discipline behind every movement. It was the reminder that strength cannot always be measured by what you see. Control is a more powerful language than shouting ever could be. Precision speaks louder than chaos. Discipline commands respect where noise fails. Keanu had demonstrated this truth without a single word of triumph, without anger, without intimidation. And that is the ultimate lesson. Respect in life is earned through actions, not appearances. Do not measure a person by what they wear, by the way they speak, by the size of their group or the look on their face. Measure them by their control, by their choices, by the restraint they exercise when tested. The quiet moments reveal more than the loud ones. In every city, on every street, in every encounter, this lesson holds: appearances lie. Calmness hides power. Discipline surpasses noise. Keanu Reeves had walked away that night not as a hero seeking recognition, but as a man demonstrating the strength inherent in control. His power was not flashy. It was not loud. It was real, undeniable, and quietly transformative. And for those who had witnessed it, thugs, bystanders, even the distant police, the night had left an impression that would not fade. Power, respect, strength, these are not measured by what is seen, but by what is controlled, understood, and held in restraint. Remember, never judge by appearances. Calm people may be stronger than you think. True power speaks quietly. Noise is for those who lack it. And in the quiet you will find the truth.